Yeah, I did not actually catch the game, Isaac. I love your t-shirt, but this is going to sound ridiculously self-centered and really superstitious. I haven't watched a second of the Oilers this playoffs. I've been abstaining. At first, I was super mad because of how silly and political they were with Mark Carney. Like, you don't let somebody suit up for you, no matter what team they're on during the election, right? Just don't do that. But then I'm like, oh wait, they're doing well, and I want them to do well. And so, out of superstition, I'm like not glancing at a TV screen if the Oilers are on. I know that sounds silly, but knock wood, like they're doing good, right? Like they won in overtime last night, I've been told.
Yeah, an amazing goal in overtime. And we all have our superstitions in sports, Chris, especially hockey, like last night, because we're playing in June, by the way. So it's super hot in my room. And I have all these things on under my jersey, and I'm so hot, but I'm like, I can't take my jersey off middle of the game, like we're winning. So I was kind of screwed there. Had to keep it on and dive the heat because, like I said, it's in June. It's like 30 degrees outside, and we're watching hockey. Which, hey, can't complain because most teams are already out golfing. But
Yeah, it sounds like a fun night. But I'm not a hockey man, but I tuned in around the second period and saw the score 3-2. I'm like, oh, yeah, just another loss for another Canadian team. But it looks like you guys pulled out. So best of luck to the Oilers. But all the Calgary people in my life, they're definitely mad. I know Liam at the Taxpayers Federation. He's just pulling his hair out because he's a Flames fan, and I guess there's no Alberta sympathy for the fellow team, even though you guys are neighbors pretty
What's
much.
your game, Noah? Do you like watching any sports ball entertainment on the tube?
Basketball is my game,
Nice.
so the Raptors, they're not doing great right now. Gotta wait a few more years for them to even get competitive. But we got the championship in 2019, so I'm still living off of that excitement, happiness.
Yeah, that basket they scored to get into the final will still. I mean, that was historic. I almost felt like we were in a
Amazing.
simulation. That was so cool. Okay, this is actually not a simulation. We have a show, so let's get it going. Hey, my name is Kris Sims. I'm the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation here on True North. I'm joined now by my friends Isaac and Noah. We're going to talk about news and politics for the next few minutes on our big show. I wanted to start with this is one of the weirdest clips I've seen come out of politics in a while, and especially coming from a sitting premier. And I don't even want to chat about it first. Let's all watch it together and then we can respond to it. Just to tee it up, this is coming out of the first ministers meeting. That is typically the name of the meeting that is given to when the premiers gather with the prime minister. And this is Ontario Premier Doug Ford chatting about the prime minister to his face. Let's watch.
Let me tell you, I'm going to be very blunt here. This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. And that's the most important thing. Now the Prime Minister is going to go to work, get the legislation passed, and we'll divvy it up. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So, and we're building a short of Santa Claus is my big belly. I got to loan it to him.
Well,
and we're building a.
So who wants to talk about that first? Like, it started out as the usual, like, lip service, blah, blah, blah. And then it took the weirdest turn, man. Who wants to go first on this?
yeah, let's say a few things. And obviously there were cameras on all the premiers there, but I just, when he said that exact quote about Santa Claus, I would love to see the shot of Smith and Mo maybe, and just see if they're like in any way surprised at that language. I mean, look, I covered this first ministers meeting. I was watching it as the final press conference was happening, and there was undoubtedly a consensus among the premiers, even from Smith and Mo, because Smith was obviously the number one premier I was watching to see if she'd go against the pack, so to speak, and say, hey, it's not as good as we're pretending that it is. But of course, then we saw the very next day, BC Premier David Eby essentially shattered the consensus because they're all like, after the First Minister's Conference, they're like, oh yeah, it's going to be wonderful. We're all going to do our energy projects. We're all so happy. Carney's supporting us, blah, blah, blah. And then EB comes out and says, wait a second. You guys aren't building a pipeline in BC. I don't know why you thought you were. And for those who don't know, Premier David Eby wasn't actually at the conference. He was the lone premier who wasn't there because I guess he had some sort of trip already planned to Japan, I think it were, or somewhere in Asia. So he sent his deputy premier, Nikki Sharma, there. But obviously she didn't portray his thoughts accurately, because I'm guessing she didn't tell Smith, actually, you're not building a pipeline through BC, because Smith went as far as to outlining the optimal economic scenario for doing that. She said she was talking about the Pathways project and how it could fund itself through essentially increasing their oil exports. So she was just saying this will be a great economic scenario. We get this project going, we'll get an extra 1 million barrels a day, I think she said, through the northwestern coast of BC. She said of BC. So obviously she thought they were getting a pipeline through BC. And then the very next day, as I said, EB came out and said, not so fast, Premier Smith. So the consensus, while it might have been rare, was very short-lived. No, you might have some things to say about the Santa Claus comments.
Yeah,
go ahead, Noah. You're just for people to know, you're in Ontario, correct?
Yes, I'm living through the Ford Nation, as we are in this part of the country. But I just thought it was very sycophantic. It looked like Doug Ford was a lifelong liberal, was a Carneyite. Rosemary Barton's conscience. It really seemed like he was going all in for the Liberals, and it looks like we know how he voted, despite what he might say in front of a camera and a microphone. But Doug Ford was really excited, even though Carney really hasn't delivered anything tangible. He has made promises to bring down interprovincial trade barriers, but really the key drivers of bringing down these trade barriers are the provinces, are the premiers. We've seen Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, for example, pass legislation to bring down trade barriers, and it's going to require Doug Ford to pass legislation in the OLA. It's going to require Premier Smith and David Eby to really taking action on this. It's going to require Quebec to back down on some of their instincts, on this issue, and to really open up their market to other provinces. So it's going to take more than words at a little meeting that is being done, in which Carney wants to concoct a consensus among the premiers, even if that sort of consensus is going to be really hard to achieve, even possibly impossible. So as they say, actions speak louder than words, but it looks like Ford was smitten by the game that Carney was spitting at the conference.
Smitten with what he was spitting? That was pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, a few things going on here. I've been in the game for a while. Number one, when you change the guard, even if the party is the same, if the dude at the head of it isn't the same person, there's this kind of sense of renewal. Okay, it's like, when you've had to be wearing like dress shoes all day, your feet are killing you, just taking them off makes a huge difference. It's like, oh, I'm a new person. So this is kind of, I think, what's happened here. So former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is no longer there, showing off his socks and talking nonsense and, putting up barriers and quoting Stéphane Guilbeault and all these other things. Like, keep in mind some of the stuff that Trudeau said, okay? Like, he's on the record saying that the only people who were noticing the cost of the carbon tax were people who lived in mansions with indoor swimming pools and 3 big personal cars. Trudeau was on the record after jetting down to Brazil on taxpayers' money, saying that paying his carbon tax was more important than paying the rent and feeding your kids. You get rid of that guy, any change is going to feel like, oh my gosh, we're all singing Kumbaya. It's a miracle. Yeah, not so much. So it was frankly silly to hear Ontario Premier Doug Ford talking like that. He's not new to this. He should know better. He should have kept his cards closer to his chest and not lavish so much praise, because guess what just happened? US President Donald Trump made good on his threat and has doubled the tariffs on things like aluminum and steel. Folks might remember during the election campaign, that the steel workers, the pipe workers around Hamilton, were so opposed to Carney's industrial carbon tax, which is coming, that they endorsed Pierre Poilievre. And Ford said nothing. Nothing. He did not say one word against Carney or his industrial carbon tax plans. So, pitter patter, I don't know why he wasn't bringing this stuff up. Noah or Isaac, I don't know if you guys have been seeing a lot of the news here, but a lot of those steel manufacturers, especially in Ontario, they're just bracing for the worst.
Yeah, and I really sympathize for the, those manufacturers who are going to have to, have to deal with a market in which their products are going to cost a lot more to sell to the biggest market. And if Mark Carney really was, doing such a fantastic job as Doug Ford, had portrayed Mark Carney to have been doing, I think Mark Carney would have, in his trip to Washington, told, hey, Mr. Trump, hey, let's ease off on raising tariffs. For all the great media coverage that Carney got on his trip to Washington, it didn't really accomplish anything. He didn't lower any tariffs. In fact, as we've seen, Trump has raised tariffs on aluminum and steel. And what relief had Canadian workers really been granted? We're really going to have to brace for the worst in our manufacturing industry. At the end of the day, even though tariffs is not a good idea for the United States, since they are such a much larger economy, they are able to sort of hollow out our manufacturing sector. And I'm not an advocate for reciprocal tariffs, but what I am saying is that the Carney government, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, need to do a better job negotiating with the Trump State Department and ensuring that the United States are granted some of the concessions that they want in order to bring these tariffs down. He said his first priority when forming government after this election would be to negotiate a new free trade deal. We haven't seen any updates on that in the news. I don't know, maybe if my news feed has been broken, but no progress has been made on that front. So definitely looking forward to more progress before we start calling Mr. Carney Santa Claus.
Yeah. Oh God, that was gross. So, Isaac, we were all chatting before we started rolling, and Doug Ford in Ontario, like his debt is $443 billion. They're in a huge deficit right now. I checked our debt clock on the taxpayer website. It's going up like $1,000 a second. So what is this? They just elect somebody in a blue tie and it's fine? He gets to quote people like Margaret Thatcher or Ronald Reagan or pretend without having the fiscal responsibility to go along with it. So this is where we're getting frustrated as the taxpayer. Like, we're not seeing the actual budget getting balanced. We're not seeing some prudence here. We're just seeing a lot of gushing. I don't know if you're noticing the same thing.
Yeah, gushing more debt onto the the already extremely large debt. The latest budget that they tabled was $14.7 billion in deficit, and this is for a bunch of subsidy programs and whatnot. But what taxpayers really do not need right now are big subsidies to big corporations. What they need is tax relief. What they need is regulatory relief. That's the way that you're going to combat this the trade war that the Trump administration wants to launch. You have to make Canada's economy competitive in spite of the trade restrictions. That means lowering regulations. That means cutting taxes for businesses and cutting taxes for individuals so that we are able to spur that economic activity. But instead of taking that approach, Doug Ford, takes the subsidize and big government approach. The big government approach under a supposedly conservative government. I don't really think that the Kathleen Wynne government, for example, would be taking a much different approach if they had one in 2018 and in subsequent years. So I'm really, really disappointed. I know a lot of fellow conservatives in Ontario are disappointed with the approach that the PCs have been taking. I mean, look at the Ontario Liberals. I mean, for all the the weaknesses and what the wrong that the Ontario Liberals have done when they're in government, leader Bonnie Crombie at least campaigned on tax cuts. She at least campaigned on working with municipalities to cut development charges and other ways to reduce the burden on taxpayers. We saw no such promises from Doug Ford, and just look at how he campaigned in 2018. It's really disappointing.
Yeah, I'll just say a few things as an outsider to Ontario and what my opinion was when I was looking at the election. Obviously, just looking at the options Ontario had, I do think Doug Ford was the best choice, but he's in no way, shape, or form, in my opinion, a conservative, certainly not a big C conservative. And this is coming from an Albertan who I would say most Canadians would probably agree at that being conservatives. Danielle Smith is by far the best conservative premier in the country, although I am biased in saying that, of course, as an Albertan. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Ontario
Say
didn't
it with
really
your
have
chest, Isaac. You can say
great
that.
options. So yeah, to think Ford is, I mean, he's clearly not a conservative fiscally, and I can see how that would be very frustrating for Ontarians. Just quickly though, when I was watching the First Minister's meeting, Ford stood out in the sense that he, more than any other premier and even more than the Prime Minister, continued in his anti-Trump rhetoric. I think more so than anyone else. He was really against the United States, and I've seen him catch a lot of backlash online for that, specifically when he threatened to cut off their electricity. Some were saying that's literally an act of war. If you think of that in any other context, cutting off someone's electricity, a country's electricity, is certainly an act of war. So, I mean, Ford has taken a real hard line against Trump and the tariffs, which that's another approach where a lot of people are going to find disagreement on. But I mean, just fiscally, I don't see how any Ontarians could support Ford, especially if you're coming from a conservative mindset. I mean, Kris, what do you think as a taxpayer advocate?
Yeah, it's just to dovetail it back into Alberta here. Smith is doing a great job standing up to Ottawa. She's doing a very good job, I think, dealing with U.S. President Donald Trump, because, of course, we got a lower tariff punishment on our energy exports. I've never understood the whole concept of let's scream and shout and call people names and then try to negotiate with them, like, especially if they're an ally. Like, that's a really dumb way to try to win friends and influence people. Like, maybe don't do that. So she didn't take that route. She was called a traitor for it in the Eastern media, but she took it anyway. So that was really good. She's doing other elements here that are also really good, like standing up for firearms owners, standing up for people's own personal freedoms here in Alberta. However, we are running a deficit right now. Our deficit is about $5 billion. So that's not okay. We also have a provincial industrial carbon tax here, still in Alberta. That's also not okay. If we look next door to Premier Scott Moe, they technically have balanced the budget. It's a really tiny little thin surplus. You can almost see through it, but it's a balanced budget as of right now. And he got rid of all carbon taxes in his province and is very vocal about that. So just a little reminder, if we want to have Fortress Alberta here, then we have to make sure that we're locked and loaded. I don't know if you guys have watched T2, Terminator 2. So Sarah Connor, super awesome character, right? I've heard people compare Danielle Smith to that. Imagine if it was go time and she goes to that New Mexico, bug out location, and she opens up the cache and there's nothing there. There's no weapons. She hasn't had any prep. So we can't be running a loose ship here fiscally in Alberta. We've got to cut spending at the provincial government level. If we don't balance the budget here, then we're not the example and the beacon for the rest of the country. So just a little amber light of caution. Speaking of budgets, did we want to move on to this motion federally in the House of Commons?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot was made out of this. I'll even put my glasses on to read it. So as we know, of course, Andrew Scheer is currently the leader of the opposition in the House of Commons, while Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre does a by-election out here in Alberta, running to get a seat back. But what was interesting is that the House actually passed a Conservative motion demanding a spring budget from Carney, spring meaning right now. The minority Liberals did suffer that defeat in the House of Commons, and it was because, I've been told, the whip wasn't doing a good head count. So what has to happen when you're in the House of Commons, okay, you usually have to make sure you have enough people in there to get a motion defeated or a motion passed. So you have to do your own, but that's why they call it a whip. You have to whip them into shape, make sure that they're there on time. It's an old term from the British Parliament. You have to make sure there's enough, backsides and seats. And if you've got a minority, you have to make sure that you've done enough negotiating as House leader with other parties to make sure that you've got enough people on your side, either from the Bloc or the NDP, whatever has to happen in that situation. So what happened is the Conservatives have this motion on the floor of the House, and it passed. And the motion basically called for a budget right now. Few things there. Number one, yes, they could. So the finance department, the permanent government, the bureaucrats in the department, they've got all these numbers. Like, they've got constant supercomputers that are churning around. They could have this thing printed up quickly, especially if they kept out all the like political language and just stuck to dollars and cents. Two, this doesn't actually force them to do it. Motions coming from the opposition in this manner, they're really symbolic, and in this case, they're embarrassing, but it doesn't force them to do it. But I still found it interesting that it passed. Guys, what did you guys think about this?
Yeah, as you mentioned, this motion has no force of law, so unfortunately, it doesn't force the government to table a budget in the spring. However, as you said, it is an important symbolic gesture, in that it shows that Parliament's will is for the government to table this, this budget, and they're just not going to comply. They said they're going to table a budget in the fall. That's not good enough. Canadians, at least twice a year, that's the sort of convention that we've developed in the fall and in the spring. We learn about the nation's finances, and we're being stripped of the opportunity to learn about the nation's finance. What does the government spending look like? What is our projected deficit? What are the projected deficits in the years going forward? This is really important information for Canadians to know. We got our last update in the fall. I think it's about time that we know what the government has been getting up to in recent years, especially since when Trudeau was in his last days in government. He spent billions of dollars, authorized billions of dollars in programs and in spending. So it is pertinent that we understand what the government is doing, how the nation's finances are looking, and for the government to really put forward a plan on how they plan on managing the nation's finances going forward. What this Carney government's sort of split between the operational budget and the capital budget will look like. Even though if you just smush it all together, you get the total deficit. That's all you really need to do. But at the end of the day, it's very important that we receive a budget annually, and receive those mini budgets alongside to really fill up the knowledge gap. And it's quite disappointing that they're not going to be delivering on this.
Isaac?
Yeah, I got a bunch to add. First of all, I think the bill failed by 2 votes, and when I last checked, I believe that 4 Liberals were absent the vote. So I don't know
5.
what they were doing. Okay, 5. I don't know what those 5 Liberal MPs were doing, but obviously they lost their party the vote by not being there, because if they were there and voted Liberal, which you would assume they would, the motion would have passed. Next thing. Yeah, obviously this wasn't a confidence motion like a budget would be, and like I think the upcoming they're voting on the throne speech, which will be a confidence motion from what I've seen. So that could, if it didn't pass, it would of course throw us into a general election. And just getting into that, the throne speech vote, from what I've seen, the NDP leader Don Davies, the interim leader, he's been saying they might vote against it.
Mhm.
So just as a symbolic gesture, that may be suggestive that he might have more of a spine than Jagmeet Singh, because he's actually going to vote against the Liberals. Although, of course, the Bloc would be enough to pass the bill if the Liberals can work with them.
And I think that's
Just
pretty,
speaking to conservative voters quickly, this might be good news, because it shows how close it is. The government lost their first vote, even though it's not a binding motion. It is symbolic in that sense. And then just quickly touching on one last thing, Chris, we talked about this in the pre-show. Just Franco Terrazzano of the Taxpayers Federation, he's been citing some good examples of times when we got a budget. World War II, the Great Depression. I mean, other examples. This is ridiculous. How are we getting budgets during World War II, the Great Depression? These are historic times of uncertainty, and now we're not getting a budget for an inexplicable reason, obviously, when compared to these monumental events.
It's like, IDK, right? Who cares? It's the clown car. I will remind people, remember when things were getting really gnarly in 2020 and we were slowly being crushed and locked down? Remember when the federal government tried saying, yeah, no budget and no plans on ever tabling a budget, maybe ever again. We're just going to keep on spending. That's fine, right? Just get past this motion so we can just spend with absolutely no oversight. They tried doing that in the middle of, even before we knew what this thing was, and everybody was still a little bit freaked out. This is early 2020. Yeah, so do not let governments tell you, oh, it's an emergency, therefore hand me your wallet. Because your rights and your ability to hold government to account will evaporate. Like, gone. And so this is why, frankly, it's important to insist and tap the desk and say, no, you guys have the math. Show us, because it's our money. The government isn't generating its own wealth and figuring out where to throw money. No, these are our tax dollars. And when they blow their budget and they throw another deficit on top of our federal debt, we're the ones that have to pay the interest charges. I have to stress this. What we're paying in interest on the debt is more than what we spend on the Department of National Defense. Those guys and gals that we want to see, you know, protecting our borders and stopping terrorism and maybe flying fighter jets and stuff. Yeah, that line item, we're spending more than that on interest on the debt. Like, this is a serious crisis. Some of the numbers that Franco was pulling out was really important, and this is just one. Carney, okay, the former central banker, governor of the Bank of Canada, governor of the Bank of England, probably knows some math. He's going to add $225 billion onto our debt over the next 4 years.
Ridiculous.
Worse than what Trudeau was planning to do. So the central banker is now worse with money than the drama teacher. Like, what gives? This guy has a PhD from Oxford in economics. Like, pull your suit socks up there, man. All right. So that was important, I think, at least symbolically, that they said we expect a budget. And I encourage everybody, including folks, frankly, who support the NDP, who are watching the show, good on ya, stay on Don Davies. Tell them, yeah, we want to see stuff like this. Keep standing up for people. Stand up for your constituents. That's the only way we hold government to account, folks. All right, this one, I saw this. There's no taxpayer element here, but I wanted to throw it to you guys. There's something going, I actually don't know. There's an airline, I can't remember which one it was. They had some sort of like celebration, a pride celebration. Was this during work, or what is going on here? Who wants to take this
Yeah,
one?
I'll get into this, Chris.
Up and away.
Air Canada on X essentially was celebrating their first ever LGBTQ flight, and I don't know what all the letters are. And it's funny in saying that one of the pilots in the video, because there was a video of this, he actually he had a quote saying like I might mess up the letters because he's like, because there's so many getting added, and this was in the video.
He was probably around my age, I'm guessing.
Anyways, Air Canada was celebrating their first ever LGBTQ flight, and it seems that they were the only ones celebrating that, because within a few hours, 5 or 6 maybe, they had to turn off the comments on their X post, because at the time there was like 4 times the amount of comments as there were likes, like 800 comments, 200 likes, something like that. And I'll tell you, I went through every comment, Chris. There were none positive. It was all just blasting the airline, saying, look, this is the important factor for flying on an airplane is safety. We don't care who's flying the plane, and pushing identity politics is not going to help us get there more safely. So that was crazy. Everyone is essentially calling on them to abandon identity politics. And at True North, we've done reporting on DEI in airlines in the past, Air Canada being one of them. They mandated employee training on microaggressions, allyship, and unconscious bias. They also have a dedicated DEI sourcing manager, and they require recruitment from designated groups. So you can imagine what those are. But of course, they're not the only airline in Canada with these identity politics. WestJet recently implemented genderless uniforms, and they also had fully female crew flights. So kind of similar to what Air Canada's doing here. I mean, the list goes on. But what this post showed, and what Canadians' reaction to it showed, is that people really don't want identity politics in airlines. What they want is qualified individuals where merit reigns supreme over, DEI.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Noah,
like we don't care.
You're crashing out there, Noah. Are you all right?
Yeah, no, I was kind of sleeping. I'm like, oh my god, here's another slew of DEI initiatives, and that the Air Canada DEI office is pushing out. Like nobody cares at this point. And I think we've really seen this in the decline of DEI in corporate America. especially after Trump got elected. You really seen corporations closing down their DEI offices, firing their chief diversity officers, and whatnot. And it seems like this transition is happening in Canada, but it's happening a little slower. If you do recall, Air Canada used to be owned by the government of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It is not anymore. It's publicly traded, and if you have Air Canada stock, I mean, you're probably like not a happy camper right now. It's not exactly doing well, and for good reason. Air Canada service is not as great as a lot of people remember it being before. So maybe they should focus on delivering quality service to their clients instead of focusing on having a bunch of 2S LGBTQI people flying the plane. Honestly, I don't care who you're going home with. If you're the pilot or if you're the person who is the co-pilot. I really don't care. All I care is that you're competent at your job, that the plane is flown well, and that I got my cup of water, my 200 milliliter cup of water, halfway through the flight. Like that's really all I care about. I just want that done well. And the fact that they're sort of celebrating this in the video, they're sort of celebrating this on like on the flight, to telling all the all the people on the plane, like, yeah, this is a full LG. Like, I don't care. Like, I just want to like listen to my audiobook or read my physical book or whatever. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to like celebrate that. And I feel like a lot of people feel the same way. They're just being having this pushed down their throats. Just a little personal anecdote. A couple days ago, one of the people close to me said that they had to go to work and they were expected to put on like a pride shirt and or a pride pin. And this person said, well, I kind of don't want to do that. Like, it doesn't accord with my values. And they basically threatened this person with being fired, saying, this is not, you have to do this. You have to align with our corporate values. And I'm afraid that company in specific is not moving away from the excessive emphasis on DEI, but I think more and more Canadians, as they speak out on this, as Air Canada sees the negative replies on this social media post, they're going to start moving away from this. You just need to keep saying what you think. And don't let the woke mob sort of try to cancel you for having perfectly reasonable views.
Yeah,
And
just touching on something quick, Noah, on your personal anecdote there, I do think that the change starts with the people in that sense. That being, I was curious when watching the video, because assuming the passengers were all randomized and this just was some random flight, like you could have booked it and little do you know you're on the first LGBTQ all LGBTQ flight. I was like, man, I wonder if anyone got up and walked off the plane and said, I'm not participating in this nonsense. I'm not participating. Of course, you understand the backlash. I mean, you paid for the flight. You're probably not
Yeah,
getting
if the flight
refunded
ticket
because
was like $800,
yeah, Air Canada's
like, not
going
gonna
to
walk
tell
off.
you that's not how it works, and you're going to have to find a new flight. So obviously, there's a lot of backlash that standing up for your morals isn't as easy as it seems compared to writing a comment on X. But yeah, I mean, I do think that it might have to get to that level for this to be completely abolished, but we'll see. We're definitely trending towards that.
when things have changed, when I was a little kid, we had to fly me and my family from BC out to Nova Scotia for a family event, which, we probably needed a second mortgage on the house to be able to do that. They had smoking on the plane then, and there were stairs on the plane, and it was just a completely night and day situation now. I find people are flying a lot more often and they're speaking up a lot more often. So, hey, if folks have a problem with it, take it up with the company. I will say I'm so glad that the state doesn't own this thing. So this isn't a government circus that we have to deal with. Speaking of family, thank you for letting me say that word. I just slipped it out there for a second. Sorry about that, True North.
Yeah, you have to
editors,
censor
whoever
yourself
you are.
going forward.
Yeah. My point is that, okay, this is in Ontario. Correct me if I'm wrong. No? Okay.
Yep.
So something, okay. In Ontario, they were making this as a True North exclusive, as far as I understand. In Ontario, they were handing out this stuff in the school talking about what family means. Who wants to take this one away? I was quite surprised by the language that was in some of the documents here. How old were
Yeah.
the kids, and where did this happen?
Yeah, so at the Waterloo Region District School Board, staff were basically being briefed. This is a staff at a high school. They're being briefed on what is whiteness, basically sensitivity training for these teachers, DEI sensitivity training, and they were being taught what whiteness is and how to not offend their students of minority descent. You know, their black students or whoever, and in this unpacking whiteness seminar, one of the materials they quoted from someone named Laura May Lindo. Now, Laura May Lindo used to be an MPP in the Ontario legislature for the NDP from 2018 to 2023 before she resigned to take up a spot at the University of Waterloo. But in a material from Laura May Lindo, they basically state that, quote, biases are the socialized teachings of white culture. And one of these sort of biases is the assumption that people have families. And instead of assuming that people have families and saying the word family, you shouldn't assume that. In fact, saying the word family is identified as harmful by our racialized students. End quote. Apparently, a family implies values positions of male authority and hierarchy. A nuclear family structure, not the same for everyone. So apparently saying family is offensive to black people. And this is something I take personal offense to because I'm half Jamaican, half Guyanese. I don't view myself as being oppressed in Canada. Canada has afforded me and my family, my friends, very great opportunities, and I wouldn't want to have been born in any other country. And I wouldn't say that I have a family. I have a mom and a dad and three other siblings. It's not like the concept of family is foreign to myself and my friends and my family. So for these, DEI activists, these radical critical race theorists, to basically assert that, black people are sort of unfamiliar or even offended by the concept of family is, quite offensive, is quite racist. Is sort of, holding, black people to like a very low sort of infantile, not even it's below infantile standard. It's actually kind of cruel, to really assume that about black people and to think that we're so sensitive, to assume that someone who maybe doesn't have both parents in the household is going to be offended by the word family. It's utterly ridiculous, and there's more and more slides to this sort of effect. But the idea that whiteness could sort of be identified by certain positive characteristics, and to assume that black people are not supposed to exhibit these positive characteristics is quite frankly racist. I don't know. How do you guys view this?
Isaac, I'll
Yeah,
let you take a run at this one.
yeah. I always thought family was like the most important thing in my life, but little did I know that just because I'm white, I thought it was just because how I was raised, how I came up, the values that my family instilled in me. But no, it's just because I'm white, so that's my bad. But I mean, this is ridiculous. This is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing as a society. It's insane. Look, there are clear data on this. Having a close family, having supports you can lean on, like this is going to reduce crime, going to reduce drug use, going to reduce all the bad things you want to take away in society through a strong family. And also, in a more holistic perspective, we are straying away from family. We look at the birth rates in Canada, one of the lowest in the world. I mean, this is, as I said, the exact opposite of what we should be doing. We should be emphasizing the importance of family, talking about how to build a family, not how to stray away from a family. I mean, I can't believe this is what we've become as a society. This is again the exact opposite of what reality should be, in my opinion. I mean, do you agree, Kris?
Yeah, a few things here. I'm going to keep my Taxpayers Federation hat on for the first part, and then I'll just give you my opinion on the second part. First off, I just want to let people know in Ontario that you guys should be pushing for the ability to recall a school board. So this doesn't work all the time, and I know it's not a panacea, but here in Alberta, we have recall legislation at the provincial level, so at our legislature. So if an MLA is totally screwing up his or her job, we can fire them in between elections. They don't get to just sit there until the next election, okay? The same thing exists at the municipal level. Now, again, really high threshold. Premier Daniel Smith just lowered the threshold, which is good, right? But the mechanism is there so that if something totally outrageous is happening, you can be like, yeah, no, you're out of here. We also have it at the school board level. Okay. And the reason why this matters is because A, our kids are going to these government institutions. They're our kids, okay? Not the government's kids. And our taxes are paying for this. So taxes are paying for that school. Taxes are paying for the school board. Taxes are taken by force from the families in that area. So if the families in that area, whatever construction that happens to be, have a problem with this, they should have the ability to fire people who are in charge of making decisions like this. So then ultimately, it does come back to the family. It does come back to the individual. This leads me to my second point within the Taxpayer Federation frame. One of the things that fans of big government and more control and more socialism and more taxes, one of the things those folks like to do is to attack institutions that make people independent and strong, that are apart from government. They want mommy government and daddy government, them, to be in charge of you. They want to make the decisions. They want to take your money. They want to decide where your kid goes to school, what your kid learns at school, what kind of car you can drive, name it. And one of the reasons why they do this and how they do this is they go after things like family, which of course anyone with a shred of common sense knows can be any construction of people who are related to each other and or love each other and support each other financially, emotionally, spiritually, what have you, within a form of household. Like, people refer to their close, tight-knit friends as family in some cases. It can be your grandma raising you. Frankly, it's none of the government's business what form of family you have. So that's the Taxpayer Federation element here of, if you want lower taxes, less waste, and accountable government, there are fights here where you have to really keep an eye on this and ask yourself questions like, why is this person doing this? To what end? What is their ultimate goal? It's not just to make people angry. It's to actually have a purpose here. And so I would encourage people to keep that in mind, that you guys should have control, more control over your school boards in Ontario. I would push for that. Push for school choice so that the funding follows the kid and you guys can get charter schools going on there in Ontario, okay, in a bigger way. And push for the ability to recall people at school boards. Now is just kind of a little story that I have. And it's from a Gen X perspective. I grew up in the 80s. I would encourage people who really, truly value diversity, okay? Go back and watch TV shows from the 80s. Seriously. Watch Different Strokes. Watch Family Ties. Watch Full House. Watch Star Trek The Next Generation. You will see everyone represented there all the time, including combinations of family. Watch Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Watch all of these shows.
Show.
Thank you. The Cosby Show. Okay? Watch these shows. Because there's sometimes I'll have some of my kids' friends over and I'll have something like this playing and they're shocked at the diversity and the love and understanding and the, responsibility, and we're all going to help each other out. All of those narratives, which were there, and people weren't freaking out about them back then. I don't know why it seems to be, again, getting back to government, and it's interesting she's a former provincial parliamentarian, why it is now that some of these folks are just constantly trying to stoke division. My spidey sense tells me because they want the ability to have more tax and control over you guys. Am I just drinking the Kool-Aid here, guys?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think, look, during the 1960s, there was extremely, extremely valid reasons
Of
for
course.
Black people to rise up and, state the injustices that were happening. But there was a sort of establishment that was created in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and it sort of lived on, sort of past its usefulness. And they sort of pivoted to a new fight. It isn't a fight for legal equality, isn't a fight against racism. It's a fight for anti-racism. It's a fight for legal preferences for minorities. It's really turned into sort of a perversive, a group of people who really don't care about anti-discrimination. They really care about getting one sort of racial group ahead of another, and sort of looking at some of the problems of these racial groups and pawning off responsibility from these individuals and from these families and towards the government. At the end of the day, having a free society where the individual is emphasized also does mean that the individual has to bear that responsibility. And instead of that sort of vision for society, they want one where the government has a lot more control over the lives of certain individuals so that they can get sort of certain racial outcomes. And this results in sort of looking at data for family formation on different races and seeing that Black people have a problem when it comes to multi-parent households. A lot of Black people are raised in single parent households. And instead of trying to communicate the sort of strategies that Black people can utilize to have more sustainable family structures, to have both parents in the household, which does lead to many outcomes. It leads to a lower rate of incarceration for children. It leads to better economic outcomes for children. It leads to children to actually be, scoring higher in intelligence metrics. There's all these benefits to having both parents in the household. And instead of trying to, communicate those strategies, they instead say, well, actually, having, one parent in the household is actually, a good thing, or actually, we should, condemn people who suggest that having two parents in the household is a good thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. It is counterproductive. I think it is insidious in some respect, and it's something that I'm always going to fight against. And I think a lot of people are always going to fight against. These absolutely radical anti-racist activists that still have a lot of power in Canadian society, even though their power looks to be diminishing.
Isaac?
Yeah, I guess I can. Just taking it to the government perspective, I said family was the most important thing to me, which may have been slightly incorrect, because I think what even eclipses that is freedom. And what I've seen in
The other
Canada
F word.
over
Yeah.
the last few years here is there really seems to be two groups of people: those who value freedom and those who want the government to control their lives, which to me is just shocking. How could, and maybe it's not as conscious as that, it's just some sort of subconscious thing where it comes down to work or whatever, but I just don't understand how you could reach that conclusion, that really you want the government to have more control of your lives. You don't want freedom over everything. Like, it just, I've never been able to wrap my head around that, and maybe some people can, but certainly I can't. And yeah, everything I do in my life is to gain more freedom, not less. So I really don't understand that ideology.
I'll finish off with this exact point, and you're both right. And I sincerely appreciate your input on this, because it's just one of those things that really gets to people, and it can kind of erode your confidence in things like family, in things like having your own independence and your own freedom. And I just want to encourage people, a bit of a blue pill here. Just make sure that you defend your freedom, okay? And if you don't have it, demand it. And in the case of Ontario, if you guys don't like what school boards are doing and what they're teaching your kid, insist, call up Premier Doug Ford and say, we need to change how we function as a government here with schools. We want recall legislation at the school board level in this case. So parents, people who have kids, adults, responsible adults and guardians can make choices for their own kid and have the freedom to do that. To your point exactly, Isaac, I will point this out. Some folks, I don't know for whatever reason, do prefer more control. They prefer kind of group control, all of that understood. They're free, I'm not kidding, to join a collective. Like, seriously, there are little towns across Canada where they kind of work in co-op. It's more of a collective. Village council decides on things, okay, like what they're going to grow for a crop this year. Like, you can choose to go live your life that way. If they want to rule that only e-bikes are allowed downtown and they're going to ban gas, they can do stuff like that. Go figure it out. Go live that way if you choose to. Stop inflicting it on other people. Why would you inflict your choices on other people in this manner? And so again, because it winds up taking away your freedom and your money, getting it back quickly to taxpayers to sign off here. About half of our incomes now, folks, are going to various levels of government, including school boards like this one in Ontario. Okay? About half. Do this project. Imagine yourself, okay? If it's safe to do so and you're not driving, close your eyes. Picture what lands in your bank account if you're on salary every 2 weeks. Okay? People would say a paycheck, but most of it's electronic now. Every 2 weeks. Double it. What could you do with that money? Could you afford more nutritious food? Could you afford to maybe send your kid to a private school? Could you get them those lessons they've always wanted? Could you save up for a house? Double that money that lands into your account every 2 weeks. That's how much the government is taking from you in taxes, okay? And doing stuff like this with it. So this is why we fight here at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Guys, I sincerely appreciate your contributions today to the show. It's been a really good show. Folks, thank you so much for listening and for watching. If you have any comments, please leave them underneath this video. And remember, everything is off the record.
Chris,
That
I was
was
just
really
picturing
good.
someone calling Ford and saying, "Hey, Ford, I saw what you said about Carney being Santa Claus. Maybe you could be Santa Claus too. Recall legislation for municipalities, recall legislation for the province, recall legislation for the school boards. Everyone gets recall legislation."
Yeah,
Actually, yeah,
I
it's
think
a good idea.
instead of governing during the November and December months, he should just do a province tour of him as Santa Claus. Go to all the significant shopping malls in the province and just have the kids come up on his lap. He must. I think he'd be really good at that. I don't know
He would
about
be a
the
good
whole
Santa.
premiering thing, but Santa Claus, yeah, I definitely see that in his career prospects.
He can deliver freedom to the good boys and girls.
Oh, well, no, it actually will say, each present will say $10,000 a day. Here you go, child. Here, you want another? Here, I'll give you another 10,000. There you
It's
go.
28,000, but yeah.
28,000 per
Sorry.
person. Yeah.
All right, that was really good, you guys.